So, church this morning, we had a guest teacher, as they would call it at Renew, and she was talking about the aspects of building community by extending invitations to people. Specifically, she was talking about inviting neighbors to church events or church related things. And while I was on board with the sentiment to a certain extent, because I think there's nothing wrong with wanting more people to be in a community, I have some problems with the approach of the argument and also a little bit with the mindset. Because one of the ideas being addressed today was that of knowing who your neighbors are, having conversations with them. And while the argument was made that it's something you can also do in an apartment complex, this is coming from a person who has lived in a home that she has probably either owned or rented most of her life, based on parts of her story that I am aware of just by hearing her speak a couple times. I know that she is a homeowner, and I also know she's from a different generation than I am, an older generation that has more experience with home ownership and is more likely to be a homeowner. Having only lived in apartments as an adult so far in my life, and the likelihood of me not being in an apartment is pretty low right now, I have to say that approaching neighbors in an apartment complex, unless it is a very unique neighborhood where you are bound by similar life experiences, most people keep to themselves in apartment complexes. And most people would prefer it that way. The argument being made this morning was that even if you get a no from someone when you invite them to something, it's nice that you reached out. And while I get that, I also know that specifically me as a single woman, making connections with people who are not someone I could vouch for safety-wise to begin with is risky. And on top of that, my apartment complex, my specifically unit in my apartment complex, is where I go for solitude and safety. Also security in the circumstances where I want to invite people that I already know into my space. And I think there is a big difference between living in an apartment complex and living in a neighborhood where you live in a house and other people near you live in a house. I think that while, yes, it is valuable to build relationships with people in a neighborhood, it is a little bit classist and quite out of touch to assume that every circumstance, living-wise, is ideal for building friendships. And maybe that's closed-minded of me, but I don't think it is, because I'm willing to build friends from scratch. I'm willing to build friendships at my workplace. I'm willing to build friendships if I happen to be involved in some type of community event. When I'm out of focus. So sorry. Obviously, most of the friendships that I have right now are either from college or they're from church. Two places that foster good relationships. But I will not agree that you can always count on people being open to building the same types of relationships in a living area. Let's just say there's a reason why I chose the type of apartment building I did. There aren't community events being sponsored by the property owners, managers, whatever. It's affordable rent, it's quiet, and it's in a relatively solitary minded apartment area, if that makes sense. If you have friends, you probably made them outside of the complex and you just happen to live in the same complex. I think unless you are in a situation like that, it's very easy to say that you should be doing better, you should be doing more. But I don't think that anyone who is not in that situation really has a right to say anything about that. Because when it comes down to it, I see deep importance in making people feel loved and welcome and seen. I do not see the best methods of going about that as invading people's safe spaces. And maybe anyone who's watching this has been in a situation like I am right now, and they agree with me, and I'm preaching to the choir. I don't really know. Everybody's experience is different. And I grew up in an atmosphere where it was easy to get to know your neighbors. You live in a farming community, you live in a small town, you're guaranteed to build those types of relationships with people. I knew all about a lot of our neighbors because I talked to my dad and then my dad told us stories. Wouldn't expect that now in my current living situation. And I don't think that's abnormal, and I also don't think it's wrong. I don't know. This is kind of a weird conversation that could be had, and I didn't know it could be had until I heard a sermon on it this morning from the opposing view that I have. I didn't know I disagreed until I heard it. Interesting how that works. Anywho, a little rambly, my bad. Happy Sunday. Hope you all are surviving the heat, because boy oh boy does it exist.